Asia-Pacific markets dip as a Wall Street rally wavers. We will focus on Japan and India. The EU passes groundbreaking AI law categorizing systems by varying risk levels. We'll also explore how the Spanish aid ship supports Gaza during Ramadan. Hello, I'm Ludovica Brignola and welcome to the Business News. Asia-Pacific markets are mostly in the red today as a Wall Street rally falters, while investors are mostly focused on Japan and India for the business day. Japan's wage negotiations finished on Wednesday, with a first overall estimate due out on Friday. Reports, though, from local outlets are already showing that large firms offered major wage hikes. Strong wage increases could clear the way for the Bank of Japan to start unwinding its ultra-easy monetary policy, with the central bank due to meet next Monday and Tuesday. In India, wholesale inflation is also in the spotlight today amid a serious wave of protest, particularly in the farming sector. For more on this now, let's go to Tim Waterer, KCM Trade Chief Market Analyst, and he joins us now live from Sydney. Thank you very much for being with us today. So first of all, Japan, what are your expectations and how is the economy doing in your eyes?
Good to be with you, Ludovica. Yeah, that's right. All eyes on the Bank of Japan, leading up to their next meeting. In terms of what we're seeing, a lot of focus on these spring wage negotiations, or the shunto. So reading between the lines, what we're seeing so far with the likes of Toyota and Nissan, obviously already offering, significant wage increases. We could be seeing an overall figure of maybe 4.5% or above in terms of the spring wage negotiations, which would be a step up from last year when it was about 3.3%. So if we do see that healthier looking increase, that could open the door for the BOJ to take action. So yeah, just looking at what we're seeing from Japan at the moment, obviously they've had this problem of deflation for decades now, but it looks like the timing certainly could be coming close, where we could see that shift away from the ultra-loose policy.
But overall, Tim, how would you say that the Japanese economy is doing? We know that it's recently lost its spot as the world's third largest economy. It is now the fourth. How is the economy doing?
I think it's a tale of two halves at the moment. So we've got the stock market, which has been going, very well, as we know, so far in 2024. The real economy, I think it's more of a struggle there. If we look at, the GDP figures, and yes, there was an upward revision to what we saw in Q4 from Japan. So I still think there are some growth concerns there. I think a lot will depend on what happens to the yen in coming months. If we do see, some further weakness in the yen, that could provide further assistance to the Japanese export sector. But once again, what happens to the yen, I think that'll be very closely tied into and reactionary to what we see from the BOJ in coming months.
Really, really interesting. Let's speak about India's wholesale inflation. How big of a problem is it now for India?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. If we look at the inflationary figures from India, the headline number has been pretty constant, around that 5.1%. But the core inflation, that's been on the slide. We've seen that falling to around 3%. In terms of the wholesale price inflation figures that came out today, we saw that drop to a 4-month low. Came in at 0.2% versus the 0.27% expected. So I think there are some underlying concerns about the strength of the consumer in India looking ahead. I guess masking that to a degree is the strong GDP figures that we have seen in recent years. Obviously, India, the standout performer among the G20 economies in terms of that growth number. So I think as long as the GDP keeps ticking along north of 6%, we could be looking at sort of 6.5, 6.8% this year. Then I think that could hold the Indian economy in good stead, despite this tailing off we're seeing in core inflation, which could be reflecting of some changing consumer demands, perhaps.
Right, and one last point on India. We were speaking about farmer protests, especially last week. We know there's serious protests going on in India now. There was another wave of protests actually in 2020 and 2021. Do you think this time round they are going to get what they are asking for?
I think there's a reasonable chance. If we look at sort of what promises were made previously by the government and the policies which were repealed So I think that's sort of, a lot of discontent there at the moment that we're seeing from the protests. I mean, essentially, it boils down to the farmers wanting to see some price adjustments and minimum price figures to compensate for these higher inflation figures that we are seeing in India, and some better overall conditions. So I guess they're looking after their livelihood. A lot of emotions at play. As to whether they'll get what they're asking for, we could see some compromise there. I think that we could see an increase to that minimum pricing. But whether the farmers get all they're asking for, I think that still remains to be seen. But certainly, I think the authorities will be wanting to get some resolution to this sooner rather than later.
Tim Waterer, great to have you with us on the programme. Thank you.
Thank you very much.